Hi friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Saurabh Chabra. So today we'll be discussing about Azure landing zones. So let's just get started. Well, I wanted to discuss about more into the landing zone where I want to tell you about the more of the infrastructure architecture, how we do create the infrastructure for the customer, and what are the options we have. That depends upon the customer to customer, right? So we have to understand what is the customer requirement, and then follow the Microsoft recommendations, and to provide the customer the appropriate the architectural diagrams and the architecture itself, so that the customer would be well informed to take the decision on how and what needs to be implemented, and that has to be cost effective, that has to have the complete security in place, and to have the ongoing and automation as well as testing, right? So we need to provide that kind of infrastructure for the customer to be able to migrate their workloads, right? So before actually migrating their workloads like application servers, we need to set up some sort of an infrastructure for the customer, so that the customer is able to migrate their workload, and then it would be seamless for the customer, as the way they are using it on-prem, and the same can be used in cloud, right? So for that to happen, we need to have some sort of a infrastructure created already before we can migrate. So as I said, landing zone architecture can be of different types. It depends upon the customer to customer, how big is the customer, and in the future also how the scale the customer is want to achieve in near future, right? So let's show you a little bit of the infrastructure level of architecture, how we tell the customer what kind of infrastructure we would be building for you, and then the customer would take the decision of what and where, and when can be started, right? So I'll just okay, let's just go into the next slide, and I'll show you uh, what I was meant by when I say a small scale infrastructure, right? So this is only one subscription I'm talking about currently, where it is of a small scale, where the customer has only bought one subscription, and everything uh, and each and everything for the infrastructure would be built inside that subscription. So a customer can buy a tenant, and within a tenant they can be multiple subscriptions, right? But in this particular slide, I'm just showing you one subscription, and everything, each and everything would be residing in this only. So let's just I'll walk you through what all things that is needed when we say in the landing zone. So it's not only the VMs that we are migrating, right? So when we and it's not only the network layer that needs to be there for the VM to be migrated. No, there are many more things that goes under the table, and that is really very necessary. That's part of the infrastructure build that we do for the customer. So first of all, what I wanted to tell you is that if we have a subscription, then the upmost important thing is the IAM and policy, right? So when I say IAM, is the RBAC rules, and the access management system, which provide us the administrator to give access to the users, right? So that users might be the network admins, the security admins, the operations team, right? So there can be a number of roles that can be defined at the RBAC level, and once those are done, then the we give access accordingly. So this is where the IAM comes into picture, and we have that inside the landing zone subscription itself. So everything here, I'm talking about only one subscription. So next comes is the policy. So as I've given you in my previous video, I talked about Azure policy. So policies also depends where are you applying that. So currently we are applying a policy at the subscription level, and we can define what all parameters we need, and we can define audit or deny or audit if any rules, right, as part of the policies. The other thing that we need to do is the cost management, right? So cost management is it is also one kind of a role which you can give to the account owner or the dedicated person or the finance who deals with this cost management. So only he would be able to read and work upon the reports that comes out of the Azure subscriptions, right? So there is two kind of roles. One is the owner as well as contributor as well as the reader role. So we can have the billing reader as well, where the billing reports can only be read and you cannot do anything out of it, right? So there are a couple of RBAC roles for cost management as well. The other things that comes into the subscription is Azure monitoring. So by default, all the resources which we create in Azure have some sort of metrics involved, right? So I'm not talking about analytics right now. I'm only talking about the metrics, because when we say metrics, it has already been managed by Azure, and it already gives you some of the matrices that are underlying and defined on the Azure monitor itself. If you want to work on that, you can create alerts out of it, right? So this is where Azure Monitor comes into place. So the other things that can be part of is shared services. So we have to decide if you want to extend your Active Directory from on-prem to Azure, right? So if that's the case, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna build up domain controllers, and then we can use AD Connect to basically sync, right, the on-prem AD as well as the Azure virtual machines. So that is where we can have our Active Directory domain controllers created and connected. The other thing is the networking piece. I've created a couple of videos for networking, right? We are creating the landing zone in terms of the VNets, the subnets, the NSGs are part of it. So these are the part of the networking that comes into picture. And once the networking is done, then we can have your the VMs, right? So once the networking piece is done, we can have our VMs, which can be the IS level, or we can have the web apps as well as the other things, right? The containers as well as the AKS, right? So once the networking is in place, we can implement the PaaS services or IS level VMs, the applications as well. So the other things which comes into the landing of subscription is the security center. So by default, as I told you earlier in my earlier videos, uh, security center, the default security center is already in place, active. So if you want a standard security center, you need to enable that, and then once you enable that, then it comes into picture where what kind of workloads you want to enable security center on, and then you can have the logs out of it, and then you can use the log analytics to get the logs, and then you can use your monitoring and alerts, right, to configure it. So but when we say a security center, it gives you a picture where how much compliance you are, how much compliant your company is. So this is where it comes into picture. So network watcher comes into place where when we have networking in place and we want to see the traffic flows, right? We can display the the source and the destination, and when we can see if the traffic is being able to flow from source to destination. So there we can have network watcher in place. So, and again, management and monitoring. So these are things I already told you. When we do Azure Monitor, we can configure alerts, we can configure log analytics and security center, right? So this is a complete set of services that we have, the minimum set of services that we ought to have in one subscription landing zone, right? So yeah, let's just go into so this is only one subscription where we have everything in within one subscription. So depends, if the customer is an enterprise customer, we don't give this kind of recommendation, because each and every subscription has its own set of limits, right? So there is a limit of the number of virtual machine that can be in place in subscription, right, as well as the other resources. So that is why if the client wants to scale up, then there is a limit to it, right? So that is why what Microsoft recommends is to have a number of subscriptions to be created out of tenant, and I'll show you how and what is recommended to be able to scale up for the enterprise customer. Okay, so let's just go to the next slide. So it's kind of a huge slide where you have to understand the piece where I'm going for. So let's see in the middle, which says tenant root group, right? So once we have that tenants, it says the counter. So this is all these diagrams are from the Microsoft Docs. So I've just taken the the architecture from there and pasted here to simplify things and to be able for you to get what is required to provide the landing zone for the enterprise level customer. So what I'm talking about here is once we have the tenant, so what we recommend for the enterprise level customer is to have the management groups into it. And for management group, we usually recommend to have three kind of subscriptions. One is for the platform, the other is for the landing zone, and then we can have a separate subscription for the sandbox and DevOps as well, right? So what goes into the platform is identity management and connectivity. What goes into the landing zone is SAP, uh, Corporation Online. So I will be discussing in detail about this, but let's just first of all talk about the tenant group, right? So once we have the tenant in place, so what we usually do is we have an on-prem Active Directory, and what we do is we create a domain in and enroll your an enterprise into the tenant, and we give that domain, right? And we buy the Active Directory tenant with that particular domain, and from there we create different subscriptions. So I was talking about identity. So let me explain about the identity and access management. So what we say is once we have that Active Directory, Azure Active Directory in place, we can have the RBAC roles, right? So this is where we need to work on this first. Once we have Azure ready, then we work on the privileged entity management. Then we work upon the workflow. We work upon the RBAC roles, the access reviews, and then once we are done with that, we create a different we create different subscriptions, right? So once we have that in place, we create the identity subscription. So what comes into the identity subscription is one is the domain controllers. That would be the extended AD from the on-prem. The other thing that we can have in identity subscription is of course Azure Key Vault, the recovery services, and there are few of the common parameters that we usually have on each and every subscription. Like we have RBAC, we have policy assignment, we have network watcher and security center. So this is common across all the subscription that we create. We ought to have cost management as well as Azure monitor in place for all the subscriptions. So this is kind of an identity subscription. So we have a separate subscription for identity. So all the workloads which are related to domain controller, your DNS servers, goes into this particular subscription. Let's talk about the other subscription, which is the management subscription. So management subscription comes into place where we are workload, where we have a common shared kind of services which would be across use across the subscriptions. Like, so for example, Azure automation account, log analytics. So this is where we usually place these kind of workloads for the managed subscription. So if you have a security kind of a for example, a college server, right? So this is where you place your college server. This is where you place your third party patching solution, your third party backup solution, right? So this is the subscription where you place all those kind of workloads where that can be used for across the subscription. So the other subscription is the connectivity subscription. As the name says, it's used for the connectivity between the on-prem and your Azure subscription. So we can have Azure DNS in it. We can have Azure DDoS standard and premium to be applied in it. What usually we have is Azure firewalls or any third-party firewall solution that has to be part of the connectivity subscription. That you can use Palo Alto, or you can use FortiGate, or whatever firewall solution you want to have, that goes into connectivity subscription and whatnot. I mean, you can have express route, you have to have a VPN point to site as well as site to site if you want to have connectivity from your on-prem to Azure, right? So usually we have an express route as well as S2S setup, but sometimes client do say that we want a VPN for point to site as well. So this is where your workload will go. And again, the common set of parameters which I said, role alignment, policy assignment, network watcher, and security center. This is common across the subscriptions. So next would be the landing zone subscription. So in my previous slide, where the previous scenario where I gave you all these part of one subscription, but when I say a landing zone subscription in terms of enterprise scale architecture, uh, in the landing zone subscription we only have the workloads, right, and all the resources which are associated with those workloads. For example, we can have our application servers, we can have our database servers, we can have our web servers inside that, and again, we can have load balancers. So your vnets would be created out of it, and then of course for having those workloads you need to have nsgs in place, your asds, your udrs, your routing, everything would be in place in order to utilize those workloads, right? So this is where you know see what kind of workload we would be using, and it can be scalable, right? It's not just that you are creating only one subscription. You can have multiple subscriptions for landing zone. You can bifurcate your environment into prod, non-prod, dev, and you can have more than one prod as well, right? So you can have prod 1, prod 2, prod 3, right? So this is where you bifurcate the nature of the subscription that you are using, right? So you can have prod landing zone, right? Prod 1 landing zone, prod 2 landing zone. Yeah. So this is where we create those subscriptions. The other thing is, yeah, I mean, if you have any old subscription that needs to be decommissioned or changed, you can very well go back to the Microsoft, and if you have your pay as you go subscription and you want to change it to the enterprise level subscription, you can go back and ask Microsoft, and they would be happy to do it, right? So if you really want to decommission a subscription, you can very well do that. There is a possibility where a customer wants to have a sandbox subscription, and before moving everything to production or dev or even testing, they want an isolated environment where they have a separate subscription for sandbox, right? So they want to test some applications. So this is where the sandbox subscription comes into place, and this is where we put the applications into the sandbox just to check if the functionality of the application, if it is working correctly in Azure, and and then you can decide if you really want to go into the sandbox and or not. If you want to do any sort of a POC, then you can do that in that kind of subscription as well. So the other thing I wanted to discuss was about the platform DevOps team. So this is where all your DevOps comes into picture, where you can have Azure DevOps as well as Jenkins, right? So if you are using Azure DevOps, it is not part of any one subscription as such, but it would be a separate entity. Again, if you want to use Jenkins, then Jenkins come into the management subscription. But if you want to use Azure DevOps, then it would be a separate entity. But you can always use service principal to be able to refer back to any subscription that you want, and you can implement whatever automation you want to have in Azure DevOps, right? So and again, that can be integrated with Git repository, and you can use Git repository to basically store all your code in there, and then you can use Azure DevOps to automate your day-to-day work, right? So if you're creating a virtual machine, you don't want to do it by Azure portal, you can very well automate things, and you can use Azure DevOps to Azure DevOps pipelines to basically have the code, have the ARM templates, or use Terraforms to create the code, uh, you know create the virtual machine, and you have the pipelines out of it, and then you can deploy your infrastructure in prod, non-prod, or dev environment, whatever you want. So this is where you can use Azure DevOps. So this is the complete enterprise level landing zone which I wanted to discuss with you guys. So if you have any questions, you can reply on the chat, and then I would be happy to answer you. So thank you very much. And if you want, you can if you like this description of my landing zone, so you can very well like, share, and comment, and I'll be happy to respond. Thank you very much.